before picking up a camera and practicing talking to the camera, I have a job. My job includes weekly deadlines. You know what I fear the most? A week without topics. A week not knowing what to do for the deadlines. This is almost the week because usually I have 2 to 3 topics that I'm thinking about doing, but I'm afraid I might be running out of topics. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a video that I have always wanted to do long before I set up this account. If you have watched my previous videos, you might know that my favorite author of all time is Somerset Maugham, the famous English author that wrote more than a dozen of best-selling fictions. And today we are reviewing all 16, I think 16, yeah. Today we are reviewing all 16 of his work that I have read. Some of them are in my room, and I have left quite a few in my parents' house, but I have kept the notes with me. Think about this topic, how exciting, because some of them changed my life in terms of how literature can reflect on your own life, even if we lived in completely different times and society. But some of them, one of them actually, I think I have to say, I didn't enjoy reading it at all. I know, I'm sorry. I can't lie. I have to be honest with my feelings. As you all well know, this is not a very professional channel for literature review. I just want to share what I genuinely think about these books, and here we are. Though, before we get into the reviewing, I want to explain, more like to myself, why I love him so much. Not because we are both Aquarius. That just sounds narcissistic. I hope we don't leave people that impression. The writer himself once said that he was merely, and I quote here, in the very first row of the second raters. His work was amazingly easy to read. He was held one of the best storytellers in the world, which made reading his work very much a joy. He traveled around the world, wrote numerous stories based on his trip and the people that he encountered with. He was once a spy, and he began his career as a doctor, which made his work extremely varied in terms of what kind of stories and characters that he can build. Some might argue that all his works are just pop fiction. They were not deep enough, complicated enough, or I should say hard to read enough, because you know some famous literature work were just not very friendly to all the story lovers in terms of plotting or character building. And I have no problem admitting that. That's why I love about them. They are about modern life-ish, because he lives closer to our current life. They were about our life, humanity, love and hate, men and women, sex, scandals, some of the most daily things. He saw through all the vanity in his circle, the people that he dealt with. He had a way to make them interesting and chic. Can you say that to a book? Can you say a book is chic? I think so, right? Yeah, I think all his works are really chic. I think I love him because from what I have read about him and his own words, he was a utterly lonely guy who didn't mind being the utterly lonely guy. A lot of his works was written from the third person's point of view. He was sharp, smart. He loved traveling alone with a lot of books to read. He didn't mind living alone and being alone. He went to parties, he read, he wrote. He was a self-made millionaire. He had a villa up in the hill in France. I think because he was born in France. he had relationships with both men and women. At least that's what the rumor said. I think his life matched my imagination in terms of how a famous writer would spend his life. And his sharp observation and wisdom of different social classes, how he made himself watching people falling in and out of love. It feels like he was one of my best friends, and we communicate through his work. Every time I read his book, I feel a sense of being understood and comforted because he had been through a lot of things and he told you all about his feelings. In terms of the stories that he crafted, he was an honest author and you could communicate with him. So today we are reviewing here all his books that I have read so far. These were some of it. And there will be a part 2 of this video because I haven't finished all of his work, but today we will start from some of his famous ones. And we'll start with fiction, and there are 3 more non-fictions at the end. I will put in timestamps. The first book, I didn't have the copy with me, but because it's his famous work, we'll start from there. The Moon and Sixpence. For some reason, this is one of the 2 most famous work of his in China. The story was based on the real life of the painter Paul Gauguin. He was a middle-aged English stockbroker who later abandoned his own family, his wife and kids, and went to Paris and then Tahiti to pursue his dreams of becoming a painter. The main character, I have to be honest here, the main character was a psychopathic, destructive, selfish man who also happened to be a genius painter that no one believed in. This book provoked a lot of discussion about dreams and reality because that's where the book's name, the title, came from. I found the plot in this book quite disturbing. I'm not gonna lie, it's cruel, but it's also an irresistible book. You might not like the main character. I didn't. At some point, I even hated him for doing what he did to his own family. I found him disturbing and even a little bit disgusting sometimes. But you can't put this book down because it's constantly dragging you into the story and you just can't wait to know what happened next, what happened at the end. I didn't like the characters. I found some of them petty. But I loved the book for a really wild journey down to the last page. It felt like this book pushed the big questions of, are you choosing the moon or the sixpence? Are you looking up to your dreams? Are you looking down to the reality? The book pushed these 2 choices right up to your face and forces you to give your own answer towards this question. And for that, I think it was an intense but really interesting read. Next, The Painted Veil, the other most famous work of his. It was also adapted into films, several, I think. It was based on his traveling experience in Asia. The story was about a beautiful woman who had an affair with her husband's colleague. The husband took her away to make amends for their marriage. And the 2 of them tried to find their true selves through challenges in real life. I have a mixed feeling about this book. I know some readers might think that the author is a misogynist because of this book. People think that he wrote a female main character that was dumb and shallow. She was a bimbo who didn't know how to spell the word loyalty. But as a female reader, I didn't find that offensive. I find it really sad, but I didn't feel like he was attacking female as a group. I didn't think he was a misogynist. Or maybe I should say he was caged inside his own time and society, that the world at that time was different. There was no romance in this love story. There was a revealing of what life was and how your choices could end up hurting or changing people around you. I think it's more about responsibilities and growth and facing the humanity, both the good sides and the bad sides within yourself. I like this book, but I won't read it again because it made me felt sad about how sometimes we can be so stupid and miss the happiness that was presented right under our nose. It was a great book. If you are interested in the story but you don't want to read it, you could just watch the movie. The movie was quite good as well. It brings a lot of complicated feelings for me because as a reader, we were witnessing something that was once had the opportunity to be something so good, just vanished. That's why I think it's a great book, but I won't read it again. Cakes and Isles. I love this book. I find it tremendously interesting. The author himself said that was his personal favorite work. It's a story about London's literary society, how a famous writer was exposed as an absolutely mediocre man. If you hate someone but don't know how to express it, go read the book, because in this book there was a chapter describing how mediocre and stupid that writer was. On surface, it was all of the words there was words of praise, saying something good about him. But if you give it another minute to think about the words, let it sink in, you will realize it's all satirizing from his personality to his talents. I laughed so hard during reading this book because I found his sharp observation highly entertaining. The Razor's Edge, a story about how a pilot was traumatized during World War I and how he went on searching for the meaning of life. The book title came from an old saying, "The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over." Thus, the wise say, "The path to salvation is hard." Frankly, I don't know how to describe my feelings towards this book. I love it. It's great. It's complicated. It's about philosophy, love, materialism, choices, and fate. I have a theory about literature. I think a lot of writers want to search for the ultimate meaning of life through telling stories. The only difference between writers is some of them found the meaning of life and they left the answers in pages in their works for us as readers to find. You could say some famous writers achieved that. John Williams, Marcus, Alice Munro, John Cheever, they all found out the answers and they told us about it. It's just up to us if we understand the answers or not. And so did Maugham. In this book, The Razor's Edge, I think it was one of his answers. Why do we suffer? What's the meaning of life and death? The book was more philosophical than I thought. It was not a chic story. It was not just a chic story. But it was still wrapped in a modern society content, so which I found it was very sophisticated. What kind of life do you want, and do you have the courage to pursue it? It was a question that I kept asking myself when reading this book. Now, getting to this pile of Human Bondage. We talked about this book briefly in previous videos. My top favorite books of all time, my whole life. If there were only 2 books I could read for the rest of my life, this would be it, and the other would be Stoner by John Williams. I know it's long, it's a big break, but it's also a little bit hard to get into. You need to let it sink in. But after you read the first maybe 50 pages, you were digging into Philip's world, the main character's world, you realized we are all the same. We are all going through the same journey, despite our identity, gender, or nationality. We were all Philip, because we were all once, or even now, lost in life and don't know what to do with ourselves and trying to find answers. I said this in the previous videos and I will say it again. It's a book that only when you grew up a bit that you would fully understand, when you have experienced and contemplated about life, that you would begin to understand. Of course, it's one of his best and most famous work. Someone who had been through the ups and downs of life, who knew the feelings of being loved and not being loved. Life became a circle when you have experienced all that. This book gave me tremendous comfort during a time I felt absolutely lost in life. And it's a book that I constantly going back to. I read it again and again, and it's my book. It's the book of my life. And I really do hope everybody reads that. Catalina, a religious story that took place in Spain. It was about a girl with a broken leg who was supposedly cured by divine intervention after witnessing a version of Virgin Mary. She was pushed, because of this, she was pushed into a power struggle from the church. It was short, but with great plots that reflected the worst of humanity. And you can't help but feel for the main character, the girl, hoping that she got a good ending, hoping that she could set herself free from all these power struggles and health problems. She did, eventually, and I felt gratified for it. Mrs. Craddock. I talked about this book in the video that I turned 31. I love it. The unconventional love story where no love was found at the end of this book. It discussed family, female identity, love and independence, marriage, how a woman could do everything for a man but ended up feeling relieved when he died. The meaning of marriage and what it would bring to you. Sharp, iconic, his style. It was all in this little book, and I give 5-star recommendation to it. If you like him or if you're interested in his work, you should absolutely read it. Theatre. You know what this is about by the name of it. Before we get into the story, let me ask you something. Have you ever achieved something you genuinely desired? Maybe like when you finished a huge project, when you get an offer, when you did something that was so magnificent to yourself. The moment you crossed that line, the moment you did it, what did you feel at the moment? In this book, the female main character finished the biggest night of her career. She went back into her room, told her maid, do not let anybody else in, because she wanted to enjoy this moment in silence by herself. The joy, the success, the fulfilling feeling of life. She wanted to all keep it to herself. For some reason, this scene just kept living in my mind, rent-free. I read this book maybe 2 years ago. That should have said something about this book, right? The absolute fantastic characters and scenes that was built in this story. I think you should consider reading it because the author happened to be the most welcomed theatric writer of his time. He put a lot of industrial insights in this book, which made it more intriguing. And when you reach to the point that I told you about, that we discussed, the absolute silence that you enjoy by yourself after a big achievement. Soon after reading this book, I had that moment, and it was just as he described it. How amazing. The Narrow Corner, a story inspired by the author's traveling as well. A story happened on a ship. Did I enjoy reading it? Absolutely. Would I read it again? Probably not. Was it a good story? You bet. It's exotic, dangerous, self-reflected. It involves death and lies. The ending of this book read, everything was an illusion that you shouldn't ask too many questions about. And I feel it. It was like a dark fairy tale, and I love it. Christmas Holiday. A book you should not read during Christmas because it will kill the holiday vibe. It's a book that on the surface looked warm and dreamy, but in fact is cold, heartbroken, realistic, and a warning. It made you question everything. It made you question about your family, your parents, the way you were brought up, your life. What's real and what is not? Can you tell? The book is about a young wealthy man traveling to Paris by himself before holiday, but ended up he witnessed the dark side of the society and the hypocrisy of his parents. Like I said, don't read it during Christmas and be prepared for the last sentence of this book. It would hammer you. Yeah, that's the word I would use. It would hammer you. And that's all I would say. Borges thought it was a great book, and I agree with him. I hope you do too. Up at the Villa. Scandalous, juicy gossip about a beautiful woman, of course, it's always a beautiful woman, and a wealthy man. Wealthy, handsome man, of course, it's always a wealthy, handsome man who might be slept with too many women in his life. These two happened to fall in love. Wait, he fell in love with her first. Something happened during the night and they ended up falling for each other. Classical mom and great description and observation about the upper class. You know what? If you have a cool uncle or if your grandpa had left an amazing life, this is the story that they would tell you during your summer visit at night when you were sitting with him on the balcony. The wind breezes, he is drinking whiskey, you are listening to him telling you a fascinating story about scandal. That's it. Go read it. The Magician. I talked about this in previous videos as well. I hate this book. I said before, I will say it again. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The story was disgusting. I hate the characters. No one in this story acted logically. The antagonist made me sick. It was unnecessarily dark. And I think the author only wrote this story to get a revenge from his readers. Or what did we do to you to deserve a story like that? I don't like it. But if you like a magical, dark and twisted revenge story that felt like a wild journey and a trip that it was like a roller coaster, you should go ahead and read it. It was still a great story with great plots and great writing. I just don't like it. Sorry. Last in the fiction section, the whole short story collection of Somerset Maugham. The version I bought had 4 books, I think. Let me tell you how great they were. Once, I almost missed my flight because I was enjoying reading them too much. I changed my clothes and sat on the living room and reading it until the last minute that I had to leave the house. It was mostly his experience when traveling, the stories he heard or witnessed. The volume I particularly loved was the story of Ashenden, the British agent. It was based on his real-life experience as a member of British intelligence during the First World War. The book was about what his life was like, how he accomplished his missions, what did he do in intelligent works. It was the most interesting spy stories I have ever read. And he didn't even carry a gun. No one fired a bullet in these stories, but still it makes you can't. At some point during reading this book, I can't sit. I have to stand. That's how nervous I was. Maybe I was being too emotional, but it should tell you how great the book was. It was all the conversations, the small details that he noticed. How he knew from the dry blood spot on someone's shirt that the killer killed the wrong man. Raymond Chandler, the famous author, said there was no other great spy story beside this one, and I agree with it. Then we have 3 non-fictions, but I only have 2 of them with me. Strictly Personal was a memoir about the Second World War, how war affected individuals and his reviewing of the changing society. He wrote down every small details that you cannot learn from a traditional history book, which was absolutely interesting to read. He was just like an old friend that you occasionally want to hang out with. The summing up, on the other hand, was a literary review of his career as a writer. What was his creative process like? How did he write? What did he think of other writers and other books? How he viewed life in general, or his own life? Had he ever been in love? What does it feel to him? Did he ever feel lonely? All these questions you might have reading his other works would be answered in this book. I read it a few times already. He was, as always, one of the reasons I love him was because he was very genuine. He was very honest in these books. He didn't care that you might not agree with him, what he had to say. He said it. And I applaud for this honesty. Last but definitely not least, I want to end this video with a book that I have read maybe 5 years ago, but it had a tremendous impact on me. I still remember it, and I encourage everyone to read it. The set of the 10 best novels selected and introduced by him. I think some versions put all his introductions together as a book. He reviewed some of the greatest fictions in history. The Brothers Karamazov, Wuthering Heights, Moby Dick, The Red and the Black, Pride and Prejudice. He summarized the life of each author and how their life shaped their work. You might not think of him as the greatest writer of all time. We both know he didn't win Nobel Prize, but he was a bridge for normal people who don't really read that much or didn't really enjoy reading, and great stories, great books, great literature. He took us into the world of literature and showed us how much happiness can be found in books and words, how constant hard work can build for a man who didn't look particularly handsome. He didn't look particularly handsome. He had his style, but I won't say he's a handsome man. And he suffered from stutter. And during the last video he gave, you can still find it on YouTube, you can sort of tell that he knew who he was. He was proud of what he had achieved. He knew what he was made of. He built a literature world and welcomed every reader into it. And for that, I would forever love him as a great author, or even as a friend who we could have never met, because it was always fun hanging out with him. The books of his is a place that every time the real life upsets me or I felt like I need to be alone, that place, these books, was the world that I would like to get into, to temporarily run away from reality, but to hang out with a great friend who would always welcome me with his open arms and let me hang out with him. And that's all for today's video. As I said in the beginning, I am running out of ideas and topics for the video, mostly because I have watched way too many Netflix and way too many dark romance recently. I didn't do anything at all except Netflix and dark romance, which is a problem that might need to be fixed soon, but I have no apologize for that. Sometimes you just have to enjoy those shallow things and have fun, right? But I will try to see you next week at the same time, hopefully. Thank you for hanging out with me. See you next time.